One of the things I like to do when I talk about writing effective proposals is I like to approach it from the perspective of what the county is going to look for when you're actually submitting a proposal. I don't really tell you how to get into the writing techniques, and you'll hopefully hear some of that with the next speaker. But my goal is to really tell you the things that we see, the pitfalls that we've encountered, and how to make sure that when you're submitting a proposal, you're doing so in the best light. And so what I like for you to be able to take away is kind of like a one-page checklist. So while I'll go into each one and give you some examples and give you some experiences we've had in these areas, I like to kind of present it in a checklist format so you can kind of take a look at it next time before you're actually submitting a proposal to the county or to any government agency. And before I actually get started, the other thing I will say is a lot of times when I talk to companies, whether they're large, small, minority-owned businesses, it doesn't really matter, but sometimes people, feel like if there's an incumbent or if this is something the county has been doing for a long time, or they're new to the industry or new to government work, that there really isn't an opportunity for them to get their foot in the door. And I strongly encourage you, I know the folks in my office and in Montgomery County as a whole, we encourage businesses of any type to please submit proposals because, there's no way to ensure that you absolutely won't get a contract more than if you don't actually submit the proposal. So please, please, please do not be discouraged. I strongly encourage each and every one of you to continue the efforts in participating in the procurement process for Montgomery County and for any other government agency. So in getting started, one of the first things I talk about, and I kind of categorize it for you in different areas, is appearance. When we talk about meeting people for the first time in terms of what we see physically, we talk about first impressions. And it's really no different when you're talking about a proposal that you're submitting to a government agency. Whether it's for $5,000, $25,000, or $1 million, appearance does matter. Now, you won't necessarily get evaluated on your appearance, but again, you may not be a successful offeror in a particular solicitation, but depending on how great your proposal was and how the appearance was, if there is an opportunity down the road or someone needed some smaller level work, they may take a look at that, or they may remember your proposal and say, hey, let me give this firm a call, see if they're available for this other type of work. So with the appearance, one of the things I talk about is to clearly label your package with the solicitation number. And some of these things I say you might think about, well, that's pretty straightforward, but we've had multi-million-dollar companies miss something like this, and I can't tell you how many hours it takes. We've had instances where proposals have gone to different places or where proposals have been in a different area because they were not clearly marked. We did not know that it was a response to an actual solicitation. So while it may seem very straightforward, it's very, very important to clearly label your package and to make sure that you're putting the accurate solicitation number so it can go in the right folder so that when we do submit proposals to the evaluation committee, yours is definitely one of them and we have a record that it was submitted timely. Like I said, we've had situations where proposals have been in different areas. Someone will call us and say, well, I submitted a proposal, and we're looking at it, and we're like, no, we don't have a record of it. And it just had, someone's name on it, or it had no association with any solicitation number. We get so much mail on a daily basis that if it's not clearly labeled, your proposal might not even get seen in the light of day. So again, I want to strongly stress that. Please make sure that you include your contact information. We had a solicitation where we had a proposal that was submitted, and we had a question, and we needed to contact the firm. We went from the front page all the way through, all the way to the back page, and we could not find any telephone number, any email address, any contact name. We actually went through 411 and the internet at that time in terms of, because we had a company name. But there was no contact information on any single page in that entire proposal. And again, resources spent really trying to track down that firm to make sure we could get some clarification to their proposal. The other thing is to please make sure that you get your package organized into sections based on the RFP. In Montgomery County, most requests for proposals, you're going to see a section called proposal submissions. And that really tailors for you the types of things, and I'll go into that a little later, but the types of things that we're looking for as part of your proposal submission. So when you're submitting your package to us, if you label it accordingly and you put it in those appropriate sections, again, you're going to better ensure that the evaluation committee does not accidentally miss something that's important as part of the evaluation. We've had situations where people will submit things, and that goes to some of the things that I'll reemphasize a little later, but we've had people submit things and there's no sort of break. It's just like one entire binder with no kind of break. So when you have a group of individuals who are sitting and looking at, tens and tens of proposals, and they get to one where they're really having to sift through to figure out where something is or where an information might be, it makes it really difficult for them to be able to focus and for them to be able to know which ones were you intending to be considered for which areas of your proposal. Sometimes we get proposals that are 30 or 40 for a single solicitation. We had one recently where I think the proposals were more than 100. So if you imagine looking at that quantity of proposals and just getting a binder just kind of dumped on you with no sort of categorization, it makes it really difficult for the evaluation committee to know that they've really seen everything that you intended them to see for the various areas. Lastly, in terms of appearance, to really make sure that your proposals are neatly organized. I can't tell you how many times we look at the clock and it's 10 minutes before something is due and people are rushing in asking to borrow staplers and paper clips and tape and pens and pencils. And as I said in the very beginning, it's not limited to a local company. It's not limited to small business or minority business. I mean, the largest of the largest will come in at times and do that as well. So it's really important. People spend overtime, they spend weekends, they spend a lot of time responding to the core of the solicitation, but they miss certain things that I'm going to go over today, and that can have a significant impact on your actual evaluation. That can have a significant impact on whether your proposal even gets considered. So you might have the best proposal, and because of some of the things that you might miss that we talk about today, we might not even be able to consider it. So again, you don't want to submit a proposal that's been stapled together 10 minutes before. You don't want to come to a government agency asking to borrow pens and pencils so you can write down names or write down information in the last few minutes, because that does impact the quality of the proposal that you submit. The next section, I don't know, Grace, if you can kind of scroll up a little bit, but the next section is the proposal accuracy. Please verify the due date and the due time. And I'm going to reemphasize this towards the bottom in terms of timeliness. But please make sure, oftentimes we have solicitation amendments that modify the due date or the due time of a solicitation. Please make sure that if you have a team who's responding to a solicitation and they're on vacation or something unexpected has occurred, that you guys have a backup. We've had instances where we've tried to reach out to people and either email boxes are full, we received an incorrect email address, telephone numbers, the voicemails are not, accepting voicemails. This is a way, oftentimes, things happen while a solicitation is on the street and we need to reach you or we need to update you with information. So it's really important. We always post any changes on our website. So if a solicitation due date and time has changed, please make sure the first place you're looking at is on our website periodically to see if a change has occurred. When you download a solicitation, based on feedback we received from businesses as well as just regular citizens interested in county business, if you have the choice now of whether to sign in, and we've simplified the sign-in process online to, I think, just like a name and an email address and a company name. So we've simplified that. You can sign in if you want to download a solicitation at no cost, or you don't have to. But we've clearly noted that unless you sign in to download a solicitation, if changes occur you may not be on that notification list. So it's very, very important to understand that very beginning sign-in process. It's very critical that the due date and due time is verified, not just from the initial solicitation, but for any amendments that occur. And while we will always post it online, some of the pitfalls that we do see is staffing changes, staffing turnovers, and you need to monitor if someone's working on a live solicitation and things happen internally in your company that someone's following up to see if changes have occurred. Proposal submission location and directions verified. This is critical. Again, I can't tell you how many times our front desk receives calls from bidders or offerors who say, you know, they're on Rockville Pike and they see this big building called Marlowe's Furniture, and you know, can they be directed to exactly where our office is? Or, you know, they're a few traffic lights away and, you know, it's a couple of minutes before 3. I can tell you I have no way of stopping time. I can guarantee you that. I can't guarantee you much, but I can guarantee you that. So I strongly encourage, for those that may not be familiar, we have people submit proposals from out of state. We have people submit proposals for the first time. If you are unfamiliar with our location in downtown Rockville with parking and paying for parking and stuff, sometimes it might take a little while to find a place to park, to pay, and then to actually come up to our office. So if that's the case, I strongly encourage you to know exactly where our office is, where you intend to park, what the parking fees are, so on the day that you're turning it in, you're not having to rush or accidentally missing something. The proposal submission requirements are verified. This is critical. An evaluation committee can only evaluate you on what is submitted. We get calls often where someone has said, please, we've worked all weekend or we've worked all night. You know, we left a section out. You know, can you please accept it? We cannot. We cannot. It's not only regulatory-wise, but in terms of fairness to other vendors who respond. The due date and time is set by regulation in terms of whether or not we can accept anything late. So what you submit is all the evaluation committee can evaluate you on. So it's very critical to take a look at the proposal submission section in the RFP to make sure that every item that we've stated is somewhere clearly labeled and clearly indicated within your proposal submission package. Solicitation amendments verified for material and non-material updates. Again, very, very important. Oftentimes we find out from folks just like you, an offeror may call and say, hey, I think you have this listed incorrectly, or hey, I'm concerned that the manner in which this is stated, you know, you might only be looking at one firm. And whenever we get those types of calls, we take it very seriously. We take a look at the document and we may be issuing solicitation amendments. We might have to issue a solicitation amendment because something with the project occurred or something with the budget occurred. So again, it's very important. Oftentimes when we change something, it's the actual quotation sheet or it's actual submission requirements or it's actual changes in the evaluation criteria. All critical things that could impact your evaluation and how your proposal is reviewed. So please make sure that when you first download that solicitation, if you're interested in responding, that you do the option that allows you to sign in so we have your contact information. Periodically check the website. Return the solicitation amendments. You have options. In our invitation for bid, there's a small box on the bottom left-hand side of the first page that allows you, where you sign, to acknowledge any solicitation amendments. Our solicitation amendment documents themselves have a signature area where you can sign and date, and you can actually fax those back to us in terms of the actual solicitation amendment if it's something like a due date, due time. But I strongly encourage you guys, when it comes to major changes in someone's proposal, changes in pricing structure, those things need to be sealed, so that solicitation amendment should be acknowledged and included as part of your proposal package. When the evaluation committee reviews something and they see that something has been altered under a solicitation amendment and they review your proposal and you're still answering the initial question that does not include any of the updates, that's less points that they're allowed to give to your particular proposal. So it's very, very important to look out for and acknowledge those solicitation amendments and adjust as needed your actual proposal as a result of those. Proposal package review to ensure completeness and required submissions are included. I say this because we had a situation several years back where it was an actual incumbent who contacted our office after the solicitation due date and time. This was a multi-million-dollar solicitation. It was a multi-award. The existing contract was coming up for expiration, so we were going back out under an RFP to resubmit. The type of service commodity that we were purchasing under this RFP, it was very heavily commodity-based, but there was a large service component to it. So in this particular RFP, while it normally wouldn't be, in this particular one, cost was weighed very heavily because once you got around the service and the support, what they were ultimately delivering to the county were products. So the department wanted to heavily weigh the price component on this particular RFP because of that, because of the higher service, because of the higher commodity needs that they were going to have under the resulting contract. So in that particular case, the incumbent called us not long after the solicitation closed and told us that in reviewing what they had sent to us, they realized that they had missed, when they collated, the cost section. So in this particular RFP, out of 100, the cost section was 40 points. So you're talking 40%, for a potential multi-million-dollar, multi-year contract, and right off the bat, they're going to have to get a 0 for that section. So 40 points lost. And I can tell you it was hard for us because this company had done really well in the past, and I can certainly imagine how difficult it was for them when they took the time and resources to put together a really good proposal. But some of these things that I mentioned, they didn't give themselves time to actually review the setup of their proposal. Did they collate it correctly? Were the required sections in there? Was there anything that was missed? Those things that we think we'll just give a couple of minutes to before we turn in a proposal really lost their opportunity for getting the resulting award. So I highly stress that oftentimes we spend so much time on the actual content writing, which is very important, but then that whole time has been lost because we didn't take the opportunity to kind of pause, give ourselves enough time, and see if everything we had done is actually included in what you're about to submit to the county government. The next area is content. So again, giving yourself time to really make sure that your proposal is complete, it's concise, and it includes the description for each submission item. We've had several instances, I would say in the last year or two, where we're looking at proposals, we're talking to the evaluation committee, and they're telling us, well, we know this firm can do it because they've had a contract with the county before for this, but they haven't included this item in here. And of course, the evaluation committee can only evaluate based on what's included, whether they've done business with that company before or not. But interestingly enough, when we've done full circle and talked to these firms who have had prior contracts with the county and asked, well, it was clearly said that you had to submit this. How come you didn't? And they say, well, we were the incumbent, so we assumed that you already knew, our capabilities or knew our resumes or knew who our folks were. And like I said, there's nothing guaranteed. We can guarantee you an opportunity. We can't guarantee you a contract. You have to put forth the effort. So some of the mistakes or pitfalls that existing companies make is that they just assume, because they have done business with us before, that they don't have to take the same care and the same time and the same commitment in the next proposal that they receive. And what I want to stress here is that every proposal that you submit has to be genuine to that particular solicitation, to those particular solicitation requirements, regardless of what you may or may not have done in the past. So each one has to stand on its own. Make sure that you include resumes, writing samples, and other required submissions. Oftentimes, we get great proposals, but when we ask for certain things that you'll see in the criteria, such as writing samples, or if it's producer services, we may ask for a copy of prior videos that you've produced or prior programs that you've done, and those things do not get submitted as part of your proposal package. So it's really important, not just your technical proposal, not just your cost proposal, but if there are other documents that we're asking for, please make sure that they do get included. The other thing is to make sure that you're emphasizing the evaluation criteria. Every proposal, request for proposal that we issue will have a section called Method of Award. You really need to read, pay attention, and understand what that method of award is. Most of the time, the method of award will not only list the actual evaluation criteria that the committee will be looking at against your proposal, but it'll also let you know how many points each criteria will be weighed against. So when you see a criteria that's 30 points, 25 points, 40 points, you want to make sure that in your proposal you have absolutely addressed that criteria, whether it's qualifications, whether it's prior projects, whether it's capacity in terms of your portfolio of projects that you're currently doing. Whatever the criteria are and whatever the weights are, please make sure that your proposal identifies those areas. A lot of time we see companies running into situations where they may have really great glossary brochures about their company, and it might tote a lot of great, percentages of what they've done, dollars, new awards, certifications, and that's wonderful. But if you focus your efforts in putting all that information in your proposal, and that's not what the county's looking for in terms of what they're going to evaluate your proposal on, then you've done yourself a disservice. So again, I strongly encourage that when you're looking at our proposals, you're looking at the method of award section and the evaluation criteria and making sure that your proposal really, really addresses point by point what those criteria are, and spending your time where the criteria have the most points weighted. Make sure to include any exceptions, whether it's technical or other requirements, as part of your proposal. A lot of times solicitations will close, and afterwards we'll get a call that said, well, I really had a problem with your solicitation in this area, or, the reason I really didn't address this in my proposal is because I wasn't really sure what you were asking for, or it wasn't clear. Another thing I'm going to strongly encourage you, and we do not mind, we actually would prefer, if you contact us while the solicitation is still on the street, let us know. Do you see any issues with the solicitation? Is there anything that you think needs to be altered or modified, or something that needs to be clarified? If something is not clear, please let the procurement specialist know. Please let the technical contact know. Every request for proposal or invitation for a bid we issue, right on the main cover page, will have the name of the procurement specialist that handles that solicitation, as well as the name of a technical contact within the using department. We give you their names, we give you their numbers, sometimes even their email addresses are included. So I strongly encourage, if you have questions, ask them beforehand. It gives us an opportunity to review it, consider it, and make any applicable changes. So again, what you're submitting is going to put your proposal in the best light. If you ask for it afterwards, we can't change something, and if it's something that we're looking at that really might have some merit, then what we may have to do is cancel the solicitation, and then everyone has to spend the time and efforts in resubmitting their proposal. So again, if there's any questions, ask them ahead of time, but make sure that you're including any exceptions, true exceptions, in your proposal. Sometimes government agencies have certain codes, laws, state laws that they have to abide by. So there may be certain terms and conditions that you may not be comfortable with, but that the government may not be able to waive. So you want to be really careful. If you have those questions, again, ask them ahead of time. Ask them so that we can address them. And when we address them in a solicitation amendment, whether you've asked for it or not, everyone who's on record for that solicitation will get a copy of what those Q&As are. So it's very important. If you put an exception in, make sure your proposal still considers the fact that you might have to comply with that. Putting an exception in, while it's important to note it so that we're aware, doesn't necessarily guarantee that in negotiations the county's going to agree to waive or alter that particular exception that you've put in your proposal. So again, ask, but ask ahead of time. And that way we can address it for everyone. Making sure, and we talked about this earlier and recently in terms of how you're combining your proposal. A lot of times we do see annual reports, statistics, glossary information you've created for your company, marketing materials. Again, all of that information is great. If it doesn't tie to a evaluation criteria and you feel strongly you still want the county to know about that, you can include it, but just put it towards the back in terms of an appendix. A lot of times we'll say if you want to add other information or additional information, just separate it out in an appendix, because like I said, if the county has 30, 40, 50 proposals it's reviewing, you really want them to pay attention to the core information in your proposal that's going to relate to the criteria that it's being evaluated on, and you don't want them to get distracted by these other items. So if you put them in a separate section or mark them as an appendix, then it'll be easier for the QSC, which is the evaluation committee, when they're reviewing your proposal. Again, we touched on this briefly, but to really clearly understand what is the jurisdiction looking for. In an invitation for bid, it's heavily commodity-based. It's pretty clear-cut. We're going to really describe things ad nauseum to really let you know this is what we're looking for. In a request for proposal, we might have, a lot of information in there. We might have some details. We might have certain requirements, but we're really kind of letting you know where we are, what we're looking to do, what we hope the outcome to be, and we're really looking for you to give us your approach and your methodology and how you think you can best meet those needs. If you truly feel that somehow a solicitation was way off the mark, again, please call our office or call the technical contact. Because if you submit a proposal, if we're asking for ABC and you submit a proposal that's for XYZ, there's going to be a huge disconnect. And again, that's going to impact the manner in which your proposal is evaluated. We want you to be creative. We want to hear your approach, but we want you to be creative and provide us your approach, your steps, your methodology that's going to meet the county's needs. If you see that the county's asking for this and you're like, no, I think they should do this, and that's what you're submitting a proposal on. And we've seen this happen where the proposal completely misses the mark on what the county's requirements are. Again, your proposal will not get the most points in that situation. So bring us your approach and methodology, but at the end of the day, make sure that it's tied into how it's going to meet the county's requirements based on what the scope is for that particular solicitation. Second to last is timeliness. I briefly mentioned this before, but I will strongly emphasize it now. When you have a proposal that's delivered, please make sure it's done prior to the due date and due time. If there's anything you leave this seminar, workshop, training with today, that's the one thing I will ask you to leave with, because you can be the best company, you can have the best proposal, you can have the best team, you can have the lowest price, you can have the best value, but if your proposal or your bid is not in our office, not the office 2 doors down, which happened recently, not the office downstairs, not the office in a different building, to the address that's on the solicitation, by the date that's on the solicitation, by the time that's on the solicitation. And why am I going so crazy and emphasizing that? We've had people call us who are like in the middle of a car accident and the police is trying to take the report saying that they're trying to get to our office to submit a proposal. I can't accept it. David told us, our director told me when he first came to the county that when he was with Fairfax, that he actually had someone come in, not only say he was in a car accident, but literally had clothes that were tattered and had like blood on and was trying to submit a late proposal. We can't accept it. Are we hard-nosed? Do we have no heart? No, I can't tell you how bad I feel when those situations occur, and that's why I try so hard to stress it at any training event I go to with any vendor, is that you got to get your proposal in by the due date and due time. We've had deaths in the family. We've had people come in. We've had courier services come in that have said that they're going to get fired. We've heard that some have gotten fired. And again, we have hearts. We feel bad. But at the end of the day, we have to have some closing time, some closing due date, and we have to be fair to all firms who respond. Most of our solicitations, and these are the formal solicitations, are going to be on the street for at least 30 days. Most. There might be a few exceptions here and there, but they're going to be clearly stated on the solicitation document. They're going to be clearly stated on our website. If you come to visit our office, they're going to be clearly stated on our bulletin board. So please, please, please pay attention to those due dates and due times, and any amendments, remember what we talked about before, any amendments that might change that. It's very important. We had the vice president of a company call our office. This was a multi-million-dollar contract, and their proposal did not get in on time. This was a huge company. They spoke to first they spoke to the front desk. They spoke to the procurement specialist. They spoke to the manager. They spoke to me. Then they called David. And again, same information. By law, we cannot accept late proposals or late bids. And if we accept one that came in at 3:01 that was due at 3, what about the firm who submits it at 3:02? What about the firm that submits it at 3:03? And sometimes we all might want to go home at some point. So there's got to be a cutoff point, and we've got to create a fair, level playing field. So again, the one thing I want you to leave here with is most of our solicitations are on the street for 30 days. You don't have to wait until day 30 to submit your proposal. If you use a courier service, if you use the U.S. Postal Service, please make sure you follow up to ensure that they have delivered it to the right location. We have had instances where people have delivered it because it was a proposal for economic development. They've originally gone to that office to deliver it. Luckily, the manager of that office that works very closely with our office happened to be taking a restroom break and happened to be walking by their front desk and saw something that he thought might be a proposal and asked and literally grabbed that person's hand and ran to our office. And this is like across a parking lot, across the street, and got that firm to our office on time. But again, you really need to look at it's not who the work is being done for, but it's got to be delivered to our office by the due date and due time. Do I need to say that again? No. So please make sure, I want all your hard work and efforts to pay off, and the only way that I can ensure that is to make sure that we can consider your proposals or bids. Any discrepancies, questions are raised as early and prior to the closing due date and time. Again, we've heard in some instances, even after pre-bid conferences or pre-submission conferences, where people will kind of come to us on the side and say, well, I really didn't want to ask this question, or I don't know if it's okay to ask, or, will that mean like I'm going to be blacklisted or something if I ask a question? And no, believe me, you will be doing a service to us and to the county if you do have questions or something's really bothering you about something that's out there, if you ask it prior to the closing date and time, because that's when we can really make an impact and consider it and make the changes so that it can benefit everyone. So please don't be afraid to ask questions. If you see discrepancies, let us know as early as possible. Keep abreast of the RFP opportunities and if there are pre-submission conferences. A lot of times we hold pre-submission conferences and we'll look and there might be like 5 companies there. We might get a lot more proposals afterwards. But this is a pre-submission conference really is an opportunity on multiple fronts. It allows you to meet the folks you might potentially be working with because the using department is represented. The folks that you're actually going to do one-on-one work with, if you get the project, are represented. People from the Office of Procurement are represented. A lot of times, depending on what it is, people from the Office of Business Relations and Compliance are represented. A lot of times people say, well, but this project is too big, or, I can do this area, this is my core area, but I really, don't do anything in this regards. And I say, come to a pre-submission conference or pre-bid conference. You can see other firms there who might be interested. You might be able to develop a team approach, a joint venture. You might meet someone who needs a particular skill set, but they're more than willing to do the actual proposal submission, and that way you might be able to enter into as a sub. Look at every possible opportunity there is out there and don't discount any opportunity. Pre-submission conference is also where you can raise questions one-on-one. You can also hear questions, and this is great if you're kind of first coming into government work. If you go to pre-submission conferences, you can hear the types of questions being asked. If you're not that familiar, and there are firms who've been submitting it year after year after year, you can hear the types of questions they have on a particular solicitation and benefit from that before you might decide whether you want to respond or not. And then lastly, what I'll end is with debriefings, and I'm going to give you two parts of a debriefing. A debriefing is an excellent opportunity that if you are not the successful offerer or you are not the successful bidder, that it gives you an opportunity to talk to the chair of the evaluation committee about your proposal, not about anybody else's, but about your proposal, and really go over with them what were the strengths, what were the weaknesses, so that the next time you submit a proposal or a bid to the county, you can really take those strengths and weaknesses into account and modify your approach accordingly. We have had firms that have done debriefings and really taken it to heart and are submitting proposals and have then gotten awards because each time you submit it, you get better each time. One thing we do not do for debriefings is a debriefing is not intended to be a discovery tool. So if there is a firm who's upset or who wants to protest, they certainly have that right, but debriefing is not a tool to kind of bash out, okay, what is all the other firms doing, or what is their proposal, or show it to me, or I want to see this. There's a different avenue and there's different procedures for those types of things, and they're listed right there in each of our solicitation documents. But again, I strongly encourage each of you who participates in the process to, number one, participate. Number two, really understand that first, you got to get your proposal in at the due date and due time. Number two, make sure you've emphasized the evaluation criteria and the method of award. Number three, not discounted the importance of really having a complete package, reviewing your package, making sure it's collated. You don't want to miss any sections and end up getting a 0 for that particular section. And then lastly, if you are not successful, do not give up. And contact our office or the technical contact for that QSC debriefing. It will really help bring to light what were the strengths and weaknesses. And at the end of the day, on a particular solicitation, there may have been 3 or 4 firms that had, great proposals that were submitted. The point difference may only have been in a couple of points, and so it's not that you really did anything particularly wrong. It may just be that there were a couple other firms who did just as great a job as you did and may have had just 1 or 2 things that were slightly different that bumped their proposal higher. But a debriefing can really help you, especially if you haven't had one before or you haven't really done a lot of proposals with a government agency, to really understand what was it that an evaluation committee was looking for or didn't see in your particular proposal, and that way next time you can do it just that much better. And with that, I'll end the presentation, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yes?
I have 2 questions. One, you had talked about amendments.
Yes.
And maybe I didn't hear the
Okay.
on that.
Okay.
What is your expectation when you receive an amendment back? Are you looking for just the signature page or
Yes.
the entire amendment document?
No, usually an amendment may, and that's a good question, because an amendment may have 13 pages with it, because there may be certain pages that have changed we want you to be aware of. There may be certain forms that we updated as part of the amendment, and we may include that. But for the solicitation amendment, we just need your signature and your date, your company information, so that we know that you're aware of it, that you've understood it, and that you're agreeing to it. So it's really that first cover page that you're signing back and including as part of your submission. Because whatever came after that, if it was amended pages or amended forms, we're assuming you're going to take that information and adjust your proposal response accordingly, or use the updated forms when you're submitting it. We have had instances where people acknowledge an amendment and then they forget about the actual form itself and they submit their pricing on the old form. And if the new form has enough material changes, then again, they're not going to get the full points. So you want to make sure, what we're looking for is that you've acknowledged it and that you're agreeing to whatever was part of that solicitation amendment. But then there's a part two, and that is in your actual proposal, you need to address what those changes were. Yes?
Yeah, one more.
Sure.
This is actually on the evaluation committee.
Okay.
Reference
Yep.
twice. And a lot of times I find that the people are not directly involved in that area of expertise. And I don't know what, and I'm in security.
Okay.
And we found that sections of our proposal were given to people not in the security business for evaluation. So we found that we had to write it in what I'm going to call layman's terms to get a higher score, because the score we got from security was very high. The score we got from the office worker was very low.
Now, what jurisdiction was that in?
That was actually a state bid.
Okay, and the reason I asked that is because the way, and great question again, because in Montgomery County, the way our evaluations go, it's based on a majority vote. So there's individual reviews of each proposal. So each qualification and selection committee member are going to independently review them, but then they're going to come together. So where you may have different skill sets or different expertise, they're going to come together as a group, and they're going to discuss the proposals, discuss what each one sees, because you also, one member may have missed seeing something, or one member may have read it differently. So they benefit from having that discussion and then having the majority vote. So that's how the county's evaluation process, in a nutshell, works. And in the county, more often than not, the actual folks or the actual department who the service is for are going to be on that qualification and selection committee. There are times, depending on what it is, like if we're buying an enterprise system, for example, it may not just be every single person on the team may not be an IT person, but you may have someone that's a financial person because of certain modules. You may have someone that's more of a project manager who's going to be administering. So there may be multiple skill sets or multiple kind of positions that are represented in that evaluation committee to really understand the breadth of that proposal. But we do our things independently first, and then we come together, and the final score is based on a team approach, because if you do have multiple skill sets, you want to benefit from the discussion of all members, so that discussion takes place and everyone kind of understands what they saw in the proposal and how that matches the criteria, and then the ultimate scoring. So you're not going to see individual scores in the county. You're going to see the majority vote. And you're also going to be ensured that not only does the individual occur, but then that they come together for a majority score. Okay? Now, we do have instances in our evaluation where the county may not have a certain expertise, or they may have an expertise, but they really are looking for a much more broader, more technical, and we'll go out. We have members of our team who might be from the state, who might be from the schools. We might have a consultant. We make sure that there is not a conflict of interest. It's not something that they're in the industry bidding on also, but we may have a consultant that comes on board as part of an evaluation team to make sure that we really do have the right skill sets to be able to review proposals. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I actually have a couple questions also. Can you explain the process?
Which process?
Evaluating the proposal.
Sure. Once we get proposals in, we kind of vet it in our office first in terms of some of the core things, like were amendments acknowledged? Do we have the acknowledgement page? Every proposal is going to have an acknowledgement page where you sign and you're basically agreeing to the requirements of that RFP. So really important to also make sure that acknowledgement page becomes a part of your proposal. It's going to be listed right there as one of the first things that you see in the proposal submission section. So once we get the proposals, we look for a couple of key things or see if there's anything kind of out of sync. There may be certain business relations and compliance requirements that have to be cleared up front, and then we send the proposals to the Qualification Selection Committee with a transmittal memo that will kind of say, a reminder, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to look at when you're done with this step, this is what you need to give back to us. So then the Qualification and Selection Committee is responsible for sitting down and taking a look at their proposals. A particular solicitation may just be written. It might be written in interview. It might be written interview site visits, written interview demos. So whatever that particular solicitation requirement is, the evaluation committee will go through each part of that process. Once that is done, we had our regulations changed in 2010. And that specifically one of the things impacted an RFP, so that once the evaluation committee is done, they submit a recommendation to our office, we review that, and if everything is a go, we approve negotiations to commence. So at this point, nothing has been publicly posted yet, and that was one of the changes in the regulations of the timing of the public posting. And the reason being is once we approve the team to begin negotiations, negotiations commence. It could be terms and conditions, scope, pricing. It could be a slew of things just depending on each case. Once they come to us and they let us know, assuming everything is perfect, they'll say, hey, we recommend this in accordance with the award and a couple of the things they're required to include, and then we will publicly post, here's who we're intending to award to. And then at that point, you have a period of time in case there's questions, concerns, issues, after which the department would provide the contract, they'd get the signatures, any insurance, any minority participation, all of those things get resolved at that end, and then we would execute the contract and any resulting purchase order. So that's the evaluation piece, just kind of at a really high level. But we do that, that change happened in 2010 as part of the executives and our director's reform, because a lot of times when the county's in the midst of negotiations, negotiations may not be successful. And if that's the case, we may have to go to the next highest ranked offer, or there may be simultaneous negotiations going on. And so, once we publicly post, if someone wants to see a proposal, wants to see certain pricing, we don't know at that point who actually may get the award. And that's why the switch in terms of the timing. But the actual evaluation itself is pretty much when we get the proposals, there's certain things we vet, we hand it over to the evaluation committee, they go through their process, which is laid out in the request for proposal. Each RFP is going to say exactly what the method of award is or what the steps are for that particular solicitation. They do a recommendation to us, we review, and if it's approved, or we might remand something back. But once everything is clear, negotiations commence. They notify us once negotiations have concluded, and then we publicly post. Negotiations might involve them. If you're involved in negotiations, you might see the using department. You might also see county attorney's office. You may see our office, just depending on what the issues are. And if it's something that impacts multiple departments, you might see multiple departments as part of the county's negotiation team. So it's just going to depend on what the issues or requirements are for that particular solicitation. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, and then also, in your opinion, what percentage of contracts are awarded to the incumbent, lowest bidder, and MBEs?
MBEs, I'm going to let Grace answer because that's her world. In terms of percentage lowest bidders, low bid only applies for an invitation for bid. So if we're going out on a solicitation under an invitation for bid, primarily commodity based, there might be some maintenance, might be some services, but that's when, as long as the firm is responsible and they've submitted a responsive bid to the county, then we look at the lowest bid. An RFP is not low bid. An RFP has multiple evaluation criteria. Cost is just a component of multiple criteria. So it's not the component, it's not the deciding factor even. It's just a component of a slew of criteria. And in terms of percentage of incumbents, I don't have that data, but what I can tell you is each solicitation is reviewed based on the proposals that are submitted, based on the criteria that's listed, and a recommendation has to come to our office, and we review that to make sure it's done in accordance with the criteria established and the method of award established for each solicitation. And while I can't give you a percentage, I can tell you that oftentimes an incumbent is not the resulting awardee. We've had a number of solicitations or contract awards where the new awardee is not the same as the prior awardee. We've also had in the last several years where the county has unbundled a lot of contracts. So whereas before there may have just been one award for a contract, now you might have 3 resulting awards, so you have new firms coming into that process, or you might have 5 firms. Maybe we've split up the zones or split up the areas or awarded it by groups. So in the past you may have had 1 or 2, and now you might have 6 awards as a result of that. So there's nothing, and again, everyone assumes incumbents are wonderful. There may be cases where a government agency has a contract with the incumbent and things are not so good, so it's not necessarily that someone is looking to, award to the person that had it before. You always want something fresh, you always want something new, you always want the best value and the best approach. And so that first chance, that first opportunity or crack that you get at that is by submitting that proposal and making sure that proposal is viewed in its best light. But there's no other behind the scenes or magical, step or process that occurs that would gear it one way or another. Now, David has said this often, and so I'll kind of reiterate or paraphrase, and that is, might there be people in departments who have their mindset or who, would like, there might be, and I'm not saying that doesn't occur, that's not out there. But what they're required to do and what we review, because they don't have the final say, what we have to review before we approve something is that the process was followed, that it was fair, that what was published is what was followed. And we've had times where we've canceled solicitations. We've had times where we've remanded things back. I think that kind of mentality is slowly changing. I don't know if it's all gone, but I know that that is not the manner in which the ultimate decision is made. Yes. Oh,
sorry,
can you answer the MBE?
Minority and female disabled-owned persons business program is enforced by my office, and I have 1 full-time staff, which is Al Boss. Maybe some of you have met him. He's the person who enforces the MBE program for the county. Right now, Montgomery County does not have a percentage goal set as to how much percentage we have to achieve for each solicitation. However, Al Boss does review, and sometimes he will discuss with me and we'll make a decision together to decide for a particular solicitation what we should be getting in terms of what services we're getting, what goods we're looking at, and then we'll negotiate with the potential awardee to achieve the maximum participation as possible. So.
Can you let her know what the percentage was for last year?
Last year, the annual report we ran, the percentage was 19.83%. So we're just shy of 20%, and we are aiming at 20%. Once we achieve the 20%, we'll be aiming a little higher next year.
And I'll just add one piece of that just to give a real short background. Because of the court cases that have happened in the past, the county does periodic disparity studies for the Minority Female Disabled-Owned Program. And based on the results of that disparity study that's done by an independent firm, it lays out what the county's program has to meet in order to still be considered valid. And so based on a disparity study that was done a while ago that we're still operating under, each year the goals are, you look at what happened in the prior year, and based on that and based on what's available in Montgomery County area, goals have to be set based on the 4 purchasing categories, which is professional, non-professional, construction, and goods. And then within each one, there's goals within each minority category. That's why it's not an easy answer to say, oh, it's this or it's this, because there is no set percent. Years ago, the county had a set 20% goal. But based on a disparity study that was done, in order for the program to still be alive and valid and intact, we had to meet certain recommendations from that disparity study. I think someone had a question.
Two questions. One is there anything being done, because you say incumbents don't get preference, but I've read some RFPs where if they narrowed the scope any more, they would have to put the company's name in the RFP.
And, yeah.
I mean, so that,
Go ahead. Okay.
And the other thing, is there some rule or regulation as to what goes out as an invitation to bid and what goes out in an RFP?
There isn't a rule per se in terms of the IFB or RFP. Invitation for bid is generally an area where you can define your requirements very specifically, very detailed, and really, no matter who responds, as long as they meet those requirements, price is really the only varying factor. That's generally when you do the bid. And sometimes we've had certain non-professional services where historically they've been done as bids, and over the years, because of the service, because of the quality, because of performance, we've realized, you know what, even though we thought that was a good IFB candidate, there's really other things that need to be looked at and reviewed so we don't run into these same issues again and again and again. And so we've made transitions, or we've made changes from IFBs to an RFP structure. RFPs primarily you're going to do when there are things other than just price to consider. When you really have a service, you have a solution, you have something that you need to look at performance-wise, qualification-wise, can the outcome really be achieved? And there's varying things. You might have details, but you don't have the A through Z, so that you really want to hear from other folks out there. In terms of incumbents, I just strongly encourage you, and we have had some firms who will call us who say, you know what, I've read this and this solicitation. We welcome that feedback. We welcome that input. I mean, you can call, if you don't want to call the technical contact and you want to call the buyer directly. We've had on occasion a few firms call that, and we've pulled it, or we've gone back and we've said, hey, you know, you said that multiple firms could respond to this. We're hearing that this is really narrow. We need to take a look at the specification. So I have no problem if firms want to call us. And if you've called someone and someone hasn't gotten back to you, or you don't think they're taking it seriously, you know, just our main office number's on there. Give them a call. Ask them to speak to a senior procurement specialist or a manager. You know, like I said earlier, we would rather know ahead of time than have to kind of waste everyone's time on the back end. Because, you know, my interest, I live in Montgomery County, I pay taxes in Montgomery County, I have 4 kids, which is why I'm running around all the time. You know, I mean, my goal is that if there's a business that's working hard, that's doing good proposal, they should be fairly evaluated and considered just like anybody else. So if, you know, we are not the technical experts, so we have things in terms of contractual, in terms of vendors, in terms of layman language, things that we look at in solicitations, but we also have partners on the technical side that we also rely on for some of the technical specifications. And so if there are issues with those, please let us know, and we're happy to question them or to vet them. Sure. Yes.
2 questions for you. Did I hear you say as part of the process that there actually is a point in time when we can look at competitors' proposals?
Sure. At any point, I mean, we're subject, the federal government, and you might be more familiar with that, has the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. Montgomery County is subject to the MPIA, the Maryland Public Information Act. And so as part of that, you can request proposals or bids. We get them all the time. Bids, generally the bid tabs are posted right there online so you can see the prices, because all it is price. Proposals, you're not going to see the whole proposal necessarily online because, you know, there's key personnel name, there may be direct labor costs, things that need to be held confidential, or financial information that's not releasable under the MPIA. And so you'd make a request under the MPIA, and we would review it. The MPIA gives a certain time period, and they do give certain cost reimbursement for the research and the preparation, depending on what it is. If it's something readily available, not a big deal. If it's done within 2 hours, it's free under the MPIA. But for RFPs, you may not see everything. You may get redacted versions because if someone has developed something that's unique to them, that may be protected under the MPIA. Am I okay? Because I don't want to change.
Just one more
Yes,
question.
sure.
Are you going to make that sheet you had available?
Yes, thank you for asking. Because of the large number of people here and to try to keep a little more green, this will be posted online. So it will be accessible through the website. Okay, so Grace will show you exactly where to download it or where to get it from. Okay?
You alluded, thank you for a good brief.
Sure.
You alluded to multi-awards and multi-awardees within one RFP.
Yes.
If my firm is just top-notch on the spot with one of, say, 3 services included in that RFP, should I be making my response to that one area? Should I be putting together a collaboration of other businesses, say 2 or 3 others, to come in as a joint effort?
Okay. The solicitation is going to tell you when we talk about, and the question was when there's a multi-award, and her firm has the area of expertise in one particular area, should she be submitting the proposal and targeting that one area? Does she need to get together with other firms to respond to all 3 areas? So when I mentioned multi-award earlier, really what I'm referring to is within a solicitation, it will tell you whether there will be 1 resulting contract, if there will be 3 resulting contracts, and how the work will be redistributed or distributed under the contract itself. And it'll also tell you whether it's by group. So we might say we're going to award to the top 3 highest ranked offerors. So in that case, you're submitting the proposal for the entire RFP. But we will select 3 firms to do work under that whole RFP. And in that solicitation, it'll tell you whether we do a round robin, firm A gets the first task order, firm B gets the second, firm C gets the third, and then we go back to firm A. Or it might be primary, secondary, tertiary. If we have certain snow removal or leaf removal, we can't always predict Mother Nature. So for the most part, we may need one award. So we might structure that as a primary, secondary, tertiary. In that scenario, again, you'll be submitting a proposal for the whole RFP, and depending on how you're ranked, you might be the primary awardee where you'll always get the work, and if for some reason you can't complete it or you can't do all that's coming your way, then we have a secondary backup, which would be the secondary firm, and then we have a tertiary backup. So if we get that 40-foot snowfall, one firm likely is not going to be able to do it, although those we structure a little differently because you got to have a lot of firms available. But for things that you can't predict, we might just want to have that backup. Like when the R grant funds were coming and we weren't really sure how much money would be flowing, there were certain services that were being used with those R funds where we thought, depending on if we got some more, we might need some additional backup. And so those types of services may be structured as a primary, secondary, tertiary. You'll have certain solicitations that will say we are awarding the service by group. So you might be submitting a response for each group, or you might decide that you only want to submit a response for 3 out of the 5 groups. That part will be up to you, and it'll be clearly stated in the solicitation. So you're not required to team up with anyone. You don't have to respond to all 5 groups if it doesn't say so.
I wouldn't lose points for not addressing areas out of my core specialty.
No, if it says we are going to award by group and you only respond to one group, your proposal will be evaluated for that group. Now, the criteria, depending on what it is, might be the same for each group and it'll be listed, or you might see here's the criteria for scope 1, here's the criteria for scope 2. Now, if you see a solicitation that splits the scope into 3 parts, but we're looking for a firm to do all three, then yes, even though it shows 3 parts, we're only making the award based on 1 firm. So then you would have to address all 3 areas. Any other questions? I thought there was, yes.
The process you described earlier seemed rather lengthy, weeks, months. Can you put a time frame on it?
Sure.
In a case where it's obvious that there's not going to be enough time for that process that you described and to fulfill the deliverables by, say, the end of the county's fiscal year in period, then is that a valid reason to submit an exception to the RFP? That the RFP was not distributed in enough time to complete the proposal, go through the process, and then provide the 6 months or whatever of performance by the deadline of June 30th.
Right. Yes, and I don't think we run into this instance, and I hope we don't. And if you're getting, yeah, and if you're getting, yeah, absolutely. And if you're getting pressured by a department, let us know. But when our contracts are not, our funding is tied by fiscal year, but the contract or performance is not necessarily. If we enter into a contract in March for a project, that project could span 8 months, but we've solicited, we've entered into the contract, and we've encumbered the funds in that fiscal year, but the work may continue beyond that. We also have many contracts that are multi-year contracts. So generally when we're doing solicitations, yeah, I mean, maybe afterward. Yeah, afterwards, I'm happy to talk to you about the specific scenario that you're thinking. But just in general, for everybody, when the solicitation goes out, we take a look at what the timing is and what that project is. If we have a situation where, when we issued a solicitation and it said, we're estimating this project is going to be done April 1st. And by the time things are done, we're signing a contract March 15th, then we would be talking with the using department to say, hey, it's March 15th, the RFP said April 1st, when you're writing your contract, because again, there would be a separate contract document, you need to put what that date you're expecting really is now based on where we are now. There are some instances where we may need to extend service until the new contracts are in place. But generally, the funding and the performance generally are not tied. Now, if it's a grant and there's a certain period of time when that grant's going to expire, it may be, but it still has to be realistic. I mean, if you're asking someone to do 40 days worth of work and there's a 1-week period, I mean, that's not realistic, unless you're just going to pay, go crazy with overtime and, let them hire additional staff. But there's got to be a realisticness. So, I mean, we do take a look at that when we do the solicitations and do the actual contract documents when we're signing it. I'm not going to sign a contract that says one thing and then 2 days later, a full report is due. I mean, we will question that. So we've run into that a few times, and then dates have needed to be changed or adjusted, or they need to give us assurance that they've had that conversation and that's still a doable date. But I'm happy to talk to you in terms of the specific issue that you might be thinking of. Sure. Any other question? Okay, thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for that warm welcome. I'd like to thank Grace and Ms. Jones for having me, as well as Montgomery County Department of General Services. As Grace mentioned, I have 10 years of experience with federal procurement. So a lot of my expertise and experience comes from the federal sector. But can the back people hear her, or does she need to? Do I need to come closer? Okay. All right, I'll do my best. Is that better? Okay, a lot of my experience comes from the federal sector, but in talking with Grace and in talking with Ms. Jones, a lot of the process and terminology is very similar. So while the size and scope of the requirements on the federal side may be different than local government, most of the information shared, with Ms. Jones' briefing this morning is applicable to federal contracting as well. And, being here in Montgomery County, not only do you have the benefit of business opportunities with the local government, but because of proximity to DC and a lot of the headquarters organizations down there, you have a lot of opportunities in this area for federal contract opportunities as well. So, I highly encourage you, especially, in this economy, to, submit as many proposals as possible, because like Ms. Jones said, if you don't submit a proposal, you're guaranteed not to get it. Okay, so I'm quickly going to go through this information because, like I said, a lot of it reiterates what Ms. Jones shared with you earlier. It's very important to know what you're bidding on. To do that, you need to review the solicitation cover to cover in its entirety 5 times, 10 times, just to make sure that you understand what the customer is looking for, whether that's local government or federal government, any municipality. Understand what they're looking for, know the who, what, when, where, why. Know if it's a pre-solicitation announcement, if it's a sources sought announcement, know if it's a solicitation that's going to be coming out imminently, know when your proposal is due, know the date of your submission, and how do they want you to submit it? Is it to be delivered in person? Do they want it electronically? Is a CD-ROM okay? Do they want it faxed over? All of that information will be in your proposal preparation instructions, and that's the area that you really need to hone in on in the solicitation. Pricing. How do they want you to price out the specific requirement? Do they have an attachment that has a price sheet that they want you to utilize? Do they want you to develop your own pricing sheet? Do they want the price written in federal government, we call it our Section B. It's your supplies and services. Do they want it simply written in there? Depending on the size and scope of the requirement and what the government is buying, it can vary. So it's wise to be comfortable, with any of those scenarios. What's the minimum requirements of the solicitation? Are there certain certifications that you have to have? Is there a minimum number of years of experience that your key personnel have to have? You really need to hone in on that because if you don't meet those minimum requirements, like anything, you're not going to be rated favorably. What's the basis of evaluation? Now, when Ms. Jones was here earlier, she noted that for Montgomery County, IFBs are the only thing that are lowest price technically acceptable, and that your requests for proposals are evaluated, that there's evaluation criteria. In the federal sector, especially in the last 2 years with the budget crunch, we've seen that a lot more solicitations are coming out, RFPs and IFBs, as lowest price technically acceptable. But there's still evaluation criteria to meet that technical acceptance. So you still have to address, the evaluation criteria to even be in the technically acceptable, and then they're going to look at your price. Services. Primarily for services, they're going to ask you to identify your key personnel. As soon as you know that you're going to be dealing with a services solicitation, my recommendation to my clients is to know who you're going to propose. Get their resume in shape, talk to them, make sure that the logistics work out, that they're available to perform those services when they're required, that they meet those minimum certifications, they have the proper licensing, whatever may be required. Identify them. That's the first thing you do. Identify your key personnel. For supplies, typically there's going to be a manufacturer part number. Now, the federal government's trying to get away from the brand name specific, and they're doing brand name or equal for supplies. So if you have a supply, what I would do is compare it to the brand name or equal that they're asking for, and just make sure that it has, all the same specifications, technical specifications, as the brand name that they're looking for. Is the solicitation exclusively set aside for a small business program? Grace said that here in Montgomery County they have a small business program, and then they have a separate minority, female, and disabled persons program. With the federal government, they have a myriad of small business programs too. There's Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business Set Aside, there's Hub Zone, there's 8A, there's all different types of set aside. So just be familiar with what your business is qualified to bid on, and look for those small business set-asides. The proposal itself. What is the customer asking you to include in your proposal? Is there a maximum page allowance? Do not exceed the maximum page allowance, because those pages don't get read. If they say your management proposal is 20 pages, they get to page 20. If the meat of your proposal is in page 21 and 22, it's not being read. Don't waste your time. Find a way to condense your proposal to get it within that maximum page allowance. I referred to this earlier, proposal preparation instructions. It's going to tell you what they want you to include in your proposal, what they're going to be looking for, what the rules are, maximum number of pages, how to submit your pricing. All of that information is going to be there. So that's a key area to look at when you're reviewing the solicitation. Evaluation. There were a lot of questions earlier of exactly what happens once I submit my proposal, what's the process to be evaluated. For federal solicitations, they tell you. They tell you what's going to happen when your proposal is submitted. They're going to tell you what the evaluation criteria is and how the evaluation team are going to rate your proposal based on those evaluation criteria. So that's another area that you really need to hone in on and address when you're reviewing your solicitation. They're going to tell you whether or not it's lowest price technically acceptable, or if there's going to be a trade-off. For example, your technical proposal may be more important than your cost proposal. That's something they're going to tell you in the evaluation criteria. Amendments. With federal procurements, it's the same as Montgomery County procurements. There may be amendments where they need to tweak either requirements of the solicitation, the due date, sometimes the point of contact with attrition, point of contact will change. So there may be amendments. You'll have to acknowledge by signing that amendment page and submitting that as part of your proposal. Again, as Ms. Jones noted, it's very important that when the solicitation is still on the street, that is, the proposal due date has not yet occurred, to ask your questions and ask your questions in writing. I can speak as far as the federal government. What happens is, we'll release the solicitation and then we'll say questions are due 2 weeks out. Typically, there's 30 days allowed to submit your proposal, so we'll say questions are due 2 weeks out. We'll get all of the questions together, have our team sit down and answer all of them, and then everyone gets a copy of all questions and answers. So while you may not have asked a specific question, thought to ask a specific question, one of your potential competitors has. So you get the benefit of seeing the answer to that question as well. So that keeps it on a level playing field. Okay, so you've read your solicitation 5 times, you know it by heart, you have it memorized. Now it's time to sit down and brainstorm your execution plan. How am I going to put my proposal together to represent my company in the best light and show that I can really perform this work the best as the overall best value to the government? At this time is a good time to think about joint ventures. Potentially getting subcontractors, getting a teaming arrangement together. Like you said in the back earlier, what if I can do one part, but there's 3 parts required? Think about who you may want to team with that will really bring a lot to your team and bring your proposal to the best light to fill in those other 2 parts that your company isn't able to perform. Past performance is very important in any government, federal, local, any government acquisition. Past performance shows that you're able to successfully perform, and note I'm saying successfully, perform a project of a similar size and scope. That's going to put the comfort level, put the customer at ease with their comfort level. Okay, they've done this before. Okay, they know what they're doing. So it's really important to think about what past performance you want to include in your proposal. That's really going to hone in on what your skill set is and how you've successfully performed these projects in the past. And how do I want to price this work? Is it lowest price technically acceptable? For a construction project, are they giving me a range? Are they telling me that it's somewhere between $25 and $50 million? And do I think I can do this work for between $25 and $50 million? If I think it's going to take at least $75 million to do the work, I may not necessarily rule it out. I may ask the question while the solicitation is still in the street. Are you sure you think an offer can successfully perform this work for under $50 million? Because I don't believe someone can. and that may make the government reconsider their scope, you know, and maybe pull a few things out to get it within that $50 million range. You may see a solicitation amendment come out where the new range is $50 million to $75 million. So it never hurts to ask based on your expertise and your knowledge of the marketplace. And who do I want to assign this project to? My recommendation is, you know, in-house, if you have someone that can take the lead on putting your proposal together, while they may not be able to answer every evaluation criteria, they may not be a subject matter expert in every area, you need someone to take the lead. You need someone to pull it all together to make sure that there's one author throughout your proposal. I don't know how many times I've reviewed a proposal and it's clear that, you know, there's 5 different authors, you know, and they use different tenses and they use different terminology and different acronyms, and you know, it's like reading a book with 5 different authors and no one there to edit it. Okay, the next step after brainstorming of how I'm going to do this is to put it on paper. And this doesn't have to be, you know, your final. This doesn't have to be your template. It can just be a draft of you're just getting your ideas down on paper, and you can always copy and paste into your final later. Make sure that you're answering the who, what, when, where, why on behalf of your company. And here I go into a little bit of detail, but we're running out of time, so a little bit of detail as to what to include in those areas. And these slides, just real quick, these slides will be available on the website as well. And I'm going to ask Grace if you can include my speaker notes so that you have a lot of more information there. So here's what I'm really here to tell you about, my tips. Okay, develop a standard proposal template for your company. This is going to save you so much time and headache when you're really at that crunch time, when you're, you know, 2 days away from the proposal being due and you have all the information that you need, but you need to really get it on paper. If you have a template, it may not work for everything and you may have to tweak it now and then, but you're going to have a good start. It's like having, you know, a proposal for an exact scope and size before and just taking that and copying and pasting the applicable information in. It's going to help you out a lot. This is key, very key. Address each of the evaluation criteria. Make sure nothing is missing, because if it is, your evaluation team, like Ms. Jones said, they're reviewing 20 or 30 of these. If it's clear that one of your competitors has addressed all the evaluation criteria and that leaves a gaping hole in your proposal, and they have to downgrade your proposal because you didn't answer a specific evaluation criteria. You could also be deemed non-responsive. So just follow the format. Don't make the evaluation team go looking for the information they're looking for. Make sure that it follows the format of the solicitation and that you're addressing the criteria just as they're asking for it. Think about your weakness and compensate for that. For example, you know, you've all heard, you know, do they need a Chevy or a Cadillac? You know, if you're the Cadillac and so you're a little bit pricier, think about what the advantages are of buying a Cadillac over a lesser dollar value vehicle. I drive a Toyota, so it's not against Chevy or Cadillac, you know. Just think about that. Think about that in terms of your company. Am I more expensive? But what are they getting for that extra expense? Am I newer to the industry? Do I not have as much experience, but I am lower cost? How do I prove that even though I'm new to the industry, I haven't done a lot of work like this before, I don't have that really strong past performance that's going to increase their comfort level? How do I get them there? How do I get them comfortable with hiring me to perform this work? And how do I really, you know, show my price as a strength? You know, in this economy, everybody's, you know, got a tight budget, including the government, whether it's local or federal. So I would, you know, that's how I would hone in on that from those two different perspectives. Keep it simple. That applies in life to everything, including proposal writing. Keep it simple, but detailed. You know, there's so many times that I've read proposals before that just have so much fluff in there, and I honestly lose myself in it. You know, you lose yourself in all of that fluff, and I'm, you know, sometimes I'm saying, well, what are they really trying to say? Just say it. Don't beat around the bush, just say it. have a second set of eyes read your proposal prior to submission, because at midnight, when the proposal is due at 9 o'clock the next morning, you're tired. You're not choosing the words you think will best represent your company on paper. So have a second set of eyes review it at 8 o'clock in the morning before you submit it at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I'm going to go back to Ms. Jones' most important point. Make sure you get it there on time, because late is late, and she can't stop time, neither can anyone else that I've met so far. And here's my contact information, just to give you a little bit of information about my company. I was a government employee, federal government employee for 10 years. I recently decided to go out on my own and set up my own one-woman consulting firm because I found a niche market where companies, primarily small companies like yourselves, need some help navigating your way through the government contracting process. And so I have the expertise and experience, and I do consider myself a technical writer, to help you write a proposal that's really going to put your company in the best light. And I was fortunate enough to meet Grace, and she let me know about these outreach events. And so we decided that it would be good to collaborate in this event and have me come out and introduce myself to you, and also let you know what you can do to really write a good proposal, put your company and yourselves in the best light, whether it's at the local government level or the federal government level. So that's my contact information. If you have any questions, or feel free to contact me, even just to say hi. And I'll go ahead and take questions now. Yes, ma'am.
This is something I never considered as a city to right now on a lot. Do you think graphics is helpful, or, I mean, it doesn't say anything, it's just a picture.
Okay, the question is, do I think graphics is important in a proposal? It depends. If it's an organizational chart, absolutely. If it's, you know, a risk matrix, absolutely. If it's a pretty picture next to your content, no. It takes up space. Any other questions? Well, I did that quicker than I thought I could. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I was going to say, now, maximum pages, you address maximum pages, but is there the chance of being too short to read?
In my opinion, no. I've never seen a minimum page requirement in a solicitation. Typically, there is a maximum because, like I said, a lot of people will sort of beat around the bush before they actually get to the point. I'm of the thought that if you can say it succinctly in 3 pages, then I don't need to read 20 pages. So as long as you're addressing all the evaluation criteria and you feel like you've adequately explained your proposal in 3 pages, I wouldn't be concerned that you're not using all 20 pages that you're allowed. Yes, ma'am, did you stop?
I just have a quick question that's probably on my mind to we're small, some of us are really small, so although we can ask you about pricing, we can find get a feel for pricing on your website. I mean, it will change from one proposal to the next. I know.
Right.
Some of us are really small.
Right. No, absolutely.
I'm looking with talking to you. And where are you located?
I work out of my home office right now. I'm in It's in West Virginia. It's about an hour outside of Rockville. I can talk to you offline about pricing, but I will say that, you know, for every project, you know, it is going to be different. But I do keep in mind what your needs are and what your budget is. Obviously, I'm a very small business, so when I went to get my business cards, of course, I wanted the Cadillac, but I went with the Chevy model. So I understand, you know, if you have in-house capabilities and you feel like you're a strong technical writer and you just want me to be that second set of eyes, I can do that for a relatively low cost. If there's just one section of your proposal that you need me to write, I'll review the solicitation, review the information that you already have available, and give you an estimate on, you know, my best guess on how many hours it's going to take me to get. But yeah, I can work with you on your budget, even if you're very, very, very small. Yes. Yes.
So it sounds to me that even if they don't ask you how you're going to accomplish the project or give detailed previous experiences, that you're recommending that really is the bulk of your proposal.
Yes. Honestly, in my experience, 10 years, and Ms. Jones, I'll let you speak on your experience, I've never seen where they haven't asked how you're going to accomplish the project. And in my federal experience, I've never seen where they haven't asked for past performance. and writing the solicitation when I, formerly was wearing my government hat, that was really the two things that were no-brainers that were going to be included in your solicitation, and then you worked all the other evaluation criteria around those two things. Yes, ma'am?
In my experience writing responses for RFPs that are just specifically for professional services, not commodities or products or anything else, the only latitude for writing something like this would be either your letter of interest or your company overview. They're very specific about, okay, that section 4 should be, your resume. Well, they don't have a nice resume sometimes, but section 5 examples of work, section 6 is that, and there isn't a lot of space in which to elaborate, I guess, in some of these that I've seen. Is that an experience you've seen in the past as well, and that's where we should be a little more expansive and creative?
It really depends on the type of project, the size, and the scope. Obviously, if it's $200,000 versus $20 million, you're going to have a little a higher maximum page number to say how you're going to perform the work, because there's going to be more involved in it. It really depends on the size and scope. What my recommendation would be is when that solicitation comes out and you've seen all the evaluation criteria and you're looking at the maximum page number, if you don't feel like you nor any of your competitors can successfully answer those evaluation criteria in 20 pages, ask the question while the solicitation is still on the street. Is there a chance that we could submit a 30-page management proposal? We don't feel like this is realistic. We don't feel like you're going to get any offers that really are able to answer each of the evaluation criteria. We recommend that you reconsider increasing the page number. It never hurts to ask the question. Yes, sir.
The gentleman over here has been trying to get...
Oh, I'm sorry. Like right here. Yes, sir.
Real quick on the past experience thing. By nature, the small businesses here are probably younger than 5 years, and it often is 5 years of experience in this particular field. How is it viewed when you say at a previous firm or at a previous with that experience? How's best to identify that?
Well, are you speaking on behalf of your company or your key personnel?
Well,
key personnel.
Small thing, key personnel is the company.
Right. No, yeah. If it's your resume, obviously there's no problem because, there's the standard format and that's typical to include in there. If it's with, a previous firm, I would just confirm with your previous firm that there's no issue in including that information. There's no proprietary information, non-disclosure breaches that you're making by including that in your proposal. But then as far as how it's evaluated, the government, the evaluation team understands that people change jobs. You've been with one company for 25 years, you have this expertise and knowledge, and you've decided to go out on your own and start your own small business. And that's very admirable, especially to those of us that are, capitalists at heart. As long as the specific information is addressed, as long as the size and scope of the previous past performance is comparable to what they're looking for in this solicitation, it will be viewed favorably by the evaluation team. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question specific to email submissions. I have seen people submit Word documents, which seems a little risky to me because they can be changed. I'm guessing your guidance is to submit a PDF?
No. It's actually to submit the executable document, especially in the area of pricing. If they give you a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet to fill out for your pricing, you need to return that in the Microsoft Excel format. If you want to create a PDF off that and submit it as well, you can. But what the government, the federal government, I'm speaking on behalf, and I'll let Ms. Jones address Montgomery County, we're looking for executable documents. And let me sort of walk you through how the evaluation process takes place with the government. When proposals are submitted, the evaluation team, like Ms. Jones said, reviews it to make sure that they've acknowledged all the amendments, that they've completed all the required information, that they meet the minimum requirements. And then it's split apart and broken out into the varying evaluation teams. Your cost volume will go one way, your management will go one way, your technical will go one way, and if there's a past performance volume, it'll typically go one way as well. So what those teams do is they have pre-populated sheets of the evaluation criteria, and they will go against your specific volume to make sure those evaluation criteria have been addressed and how well they've been addressed, and they will rank you. They will rate you, assign points, and they will rank you ultimately, come to a consensus, decide who is the overall best value to the government, and then that's recommended to what we call the source selection authority. And he or she puts together a source selection decision document, and typically what happens is from your Word document proposal, if you have something in there that's really a technically superior solution to this project, they'll copy and paste that and put it in their source selection decision document and say team XYZ is proposing this, and they'll include it in there. So it's just, like anything, if there's good information in one document and it needs to be included in the other document, it just makes it easier for them to use that rather than just retyping it. And your cost proposal, typically you'll see that there's an Excel spreadsheet that they want you to fill out. It's because not only are they reviewing your cost submission, they're determining cost realism, how realistic is it, and they're doing a cost reasonableness, how reasonable is it. So they may tweak your numbers. You may see that your proposed price and ultimately your evaluated price are two different things, because perhaps for the base year you have a price, and then for each option year you say that your rates for your senior technical people that are it's a competitive industry, that their salaries are only going to go up by 0.5%. And the rest of the market is saying, nope, they're going to go up by 3%. Well, then that's not reasonable. So they're going to adjust your option years accordingly of what's a realistic price of how far those salaries are going to go up. So that's why they need them in an executable format.
Can I ask another, not really follow-up, but different question?
Sure.
Can you talk about cover letters, how to, what should you address in your cover letter? How can that be an asset or a tool?
As far as marketing, I think, your cover letter, the terminology that I'm used to is your capability statement. When you're marketing your firm to the government, whether it's local government or federal government, you really want to just hone in on how you stand out from your competitors. But as far as including like a capability cover letter in your proposal, if it's not adding value, if it's not addressing one of those evaluation criteria, I would nix it. I wouldn't include it. That's not to say that you can't copy and paste information from your capability statement in order to address one of the evaluation criteria. But to just put it in there as a cover page, I would nix it. Are there any other questions? Am I missing anyone? Well, I think we've wrapped it up right on time.